Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our last Monday conversation about prayer. Now, I know you're probably sad. You can always pause the video, go have a good cry. We probably will afterwards. There'll be tears of joy. I don't know. But we've had such an awesome time every week just being able to talk a little bit more about what we talked about last Thursday. And we're going to do that again here today. My name is Travis Wills. I'm one of the worship leaders for Recovery. And we've got the boss man, Jamie, over here. Why don't you introduce yourself, Jamie, and remind the good people at home what we're doing today.
Oh, wow, we're going to have to work on these introductions. Definitely not the boss man. But I'm Jamie, and I'm a believer in Jesus who struggles with issues around sexual integrity, codependency, and perfectionism. Grateful to be here with you guys, get to do this. Grateful for Travis for making it happen. And just to show you how fluid things are, I said in the video Thursday night that we were going to choose a different topic that I couldn't even cover. But we're actually going to talk about forgiveness today because that other topic I couldn't cover, we're going to do that, a whole sermon on that this coming Thursday. So, just changing it up, keep everybody guessing.
Awesome. Now, before we get into the conversation, I do want to remind people we actually just met for the first time in person this last Thursday, which was just such a blessing. I was so moved. Everyone was so moved to just be able to be in God's presence physically together. Now, there are guidelines that we have to follow, but I want to make sure that you know that we're going to meet again this Thursday. And if there's bad weather, we'll announce on Facebook at 5 o'clock whether we'll have the service or if we have to cancel. But we want to make sure that you know that we have started to meet, and we want to invite you to come be with us in person if you feel safe. Of course, we're still going to continue to offer worship online, so don't feel like you have to, but we would love to have you there as we worship God and grow closer to his heart, as well as take that next step in our recovery journeys. Now to talk about forgiveness, as Jamie mentioned, forgiveness can be such a hard topic, can it, Jamie?
Oh, yes. And Travis, before going farther, you want to introduce yourself to the recovery folks and when we use that language?
Absolutely. I didn't use that language, so thank you for reminding me to do that. My name is Travis Wills, and I'm a child of God, and sometimes I forget things, like introducing myself for recovery. I have childhood trauma in my life. There are bouts of depression and anxiety that I face, and I have to intentionally battle with God's help. But those things don't define who I am. My identity is in Christ alone, the one who overcame sin and death, and he has called me forgiven. He calls me child, and he calls me beloved. And so that's something that we say when we remember to, is we introduce ourselves that way, and you're welcome to introduce yourself that way too when we meet together in person. So, yes. So as we said, we were talking about forgiveness and how it can be a very difficult thing. Jamie, go ahead and take us away.
Well, and it's just because of what you just mentioned. And when we think about the past, and even sometimes when we have forgiven, but especially when we haven't, there's just it's like there are landmines there. And we think of something, or we see someone, or we see a picture, and it just brings back a painful memory. And so it's hard. It is really difficult, and I completely understand why me and a whole lot of other people put it off as long as possible. And Brooke just hammers me on this the three little letters that spell the word "and." So it's hard, and it's absolutely essential for our recovery.
Yeah.
We have to find a way. Somehow, God will help us. We got to find a way to forgive. Otherwise, we just stay trapped.
That is so true. Now it's essential, and it's hard, but you gave us some tips on Thursday on how to do forgiveness better, how we can forgive others, that is. And so some of those tips you shared were to work the 12 steps, to work through those, which leads us into a place where we can forgive others. The sick man's prayer. You also mentioned, which I thought was so important and so crucial, and something that I received and that I'm going to try to start doing as well, is that you pray for the person that you need to forgive. You actually pray for God to do for them what we ask God to do for us. And that is a game changer. That is a huge shift in perspective, very selfless. And I think it readjusts our heart and our mindset and really allows us to see that person as a person, even though they've caused us harm. Yes. So I think that's a beautiful thing to do. And so I think that's essential. The problem is sometimes those things don't feel like they're working. Sometimes we may try to put those in practice, but maybe that trauma was so severe, so deeply ingrained in us that we can't let go of our anger, our distrust, our wounds are still festering, and we can't move into that place where we can forgive. What do we do in those cases?
Well, let me first say, I don't know, because I've not ever been in another person's shoes. I can tell you what I had to do. And when I was in therapy, one of the many times, I don't know if you can see this book, it's called Victory Over the Darkness. And my counselor said, we're going to go through this book. It's when I was really getting serious about working on my porn addiction. And in here is something the author calls the 12 steps of forgiveness. He obviously had a recovery background, but here's something you just mentioned, the trauma we've suffered. This is something that he mentions in this book on the chapter on forgiveness. This is what he says. People are not in bondage to past traumas. They are in bondage to the lies they believed about themselves, about God, or about how to live as a result of the trauma. Mm. So he says it's not the trauma that keeps us in bondage. It's what we believed about ourselves, like we're a bad person. We deserve this, or God is not there, or God doesn't care. Like the trauma was a trauma, right? It was terrible. It should never have happened. But it's, especially if it happened in our childhood, it's what we believed about ourselves as a result of that. It's how did we make sense of this? You always try and make sense of it. And a lot of times, the way we made sense of it was we were bad. We deserved this. And that just follows us every day the rest of our lives till we deal with it. So it's that idea of how we brought that into our worldview, that trauma that happened to us. And so that's why having our identity based in Jesus is one of the things that sets us free, because that's the truth. So this author, and I don't want to go through all the 12 of his steps, because some of them we already know, and we don't want to take the time to do all that. But here's one of the things that he said was essential. It's one of the things that I did that really helped me. But I'm not a counselor, so people need to do this, as they think is best, and maybe with somebody with them. But he said that one of the ways that we can learn to forgive is that we actually sort of go back to that place, to that event, and we name it. We name what happened. And sometimes the trauma was somebody didn't protect us, so we name what didn't happen. That we name it, and we name how that made us feel, and then we say, God, I am making the choice of forgiveness to not hold this against this person anymore, and for me not to stay trapped in what I believed about myself as a result. And that was of his steps, that was the one that I found the most difficult and the most productive, was I would think about what happened, how it made me feel, name those things to God, pray specifically, and then ask and just tell God, I'm making the choice, and then allow him to set me free.
Wow. That's powerful stuff. Do me a favor and hold up that book again, so that in case anybody else wants to take that, hold up just a little bit higher so that we can see a little bit more. There it is, Victory Over the Darkness. Who's the author of that, Jamie?
Neil Anderson. It's an old book at this point. It's probably 30 years old. Mm-hmm. But I'm an old guy, so I was around when it came out. I was way into adulthood at that point. But it's a great book. I'd love to do for us to do a study in recovery on this book one day. It's been super helpful to me. His major thing that he does in the whole book is he talks about our identity in Christ and how we can live into that by that self-talk that we most often do that's negative. We can say, no, this is who Jesus says I am. And I do those things all the time and have found them very helpful.
That's great. Well, we'll drop a link in the comments below so that if you want to go find that book and read that, you can go do that. So thank you so much for doing that for us, Jamie. So forgiveness, so important. And it's something that we try to practice because we have received it from our Father. And so we thank God and Jesus Christ for his sacrifice and his forgiveness. And then we answer that call to forgive ourselves, which is sometimes more difficult than forgiving others. And then we turn that out because he calls us to forgive our neighbors and our enemies. And so we seek to do that. And that's a lot of times the start of our healing. Jamie, thank you so much for preaching about it on Thursday and for us talking about it here today. And I believe this is our last weekly video. So we might be coming back eventually for some other topical videos. But for right now, this is our last one for this prayer series. Of course, you are always welcome to go into the comments. Let us know your thoughts on what we talked about today. Anything we can pray for you about, any scriptures that are inspirational to you, anything you want to comment, go ahead, go ask a question, and we'd love to interact with you down below. And Jamie, you have anything else to say before we sign off?
Well, yeah, as you said that, it just brought one other thing to mind as we wrap up this series and this talk about forgiveness. The author said that he's also a Christian counselor. He said when he has worked through this steps of forgiveness with folks in his office, he said 95% put as the number one or two person they needed to forgive their mom or dad. Almost all the lists on the list were close relatives. And the two most overlooked people was God and themselves. Now, I know it's weird to think about forgiving God, but, you know, we talked about in that trauma how we misunderstand what happened, or we build it in somehow. And some of us, that becomes a block between us and God. Or we can't forgive ourselves. And, you know, even when we're little, we just take this crazy amount of responsibility for things because that's the way we understand the world. So I know that this is a hard subject. If anybody wants to talk about it, you know, be glad to call the recovery phone line, call the church, email me from the recovery website. Be glad to talk to anybody talk to your sponsors, talk to people in your groups. I bet everybody that you see that's working the program, they have worked through a lot of forgiveness and issues around that, and they'll be glad to talk with you about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jamie, thank you so much for these last few weeks. It's been a really great time. Thank you all at home for supporting us and jumping on the comments and talking through those. And we'll continue the conversations. Be here on Thursday night at 6:30 p.m. We have share groups at 7:40 p.m. Now we've moved those back to 7:40. So now that we're meeting in person and we have instructions on how to get into those during our online service and in-person services. So be there for that. And if you need anything else, don't hesitate to send us a message. Like Jamie said, give us a call, send us an email. We'd love to have a conversation with you about taking that next step in your journey toward healing and wholeness. So for now, we'll see you later.
Thanks, everybody.